Okay, gang. Looks like we're doing an upland game bird video again. Let me slide. There we go. There it is. It's an upland game bird video. The reason I'm doing another recap on this is because a few days ago I posted a video on ruff grouse hunting and producing these fan mounts for your ruff grouse feathers and fans. Okay. And a subscriber, a very special subscriber to my channel, and I'm a subscriber to his channel, is Mr. Pennsylvania. And he noted in my video in the comment section, and I love the comment, and he says, Ralph, the ruff grouse is the state bird of Pennsylvania. And look at that beautiful, puffy, proud wood chicken. And it kind of touched me. I don't know his first name, but if you look him up on YouTube, it's the Rondinelli Project, and he's an awesome guy, retired school teacher from Pennsylvania. I think he taught like middle school or junior high, world history, those sort of things. You'll probably get more of that if you ever check out his videos in his channel, which I highly recommend because he does some amazing stuff. He's a fisherman, a hunter, a wildlife artist. He carves these amazing fish that look like actual mounted fish. Like if you caught a fish and took it to a taxidermist, but he makes these fish purely out of wood or some sort of a material that he can manipulate and do. And an awesome guy. Love his channel, love his videos. So I wanted to bring up a little bit more about this mutually loved game bird, the ruff grouse. So as you look in this page here, I'm going to get these cards out of here. That was just a placeholder. But if you look at this picture of these two ruff grouse tail fans, okay, you ever notice on this bigger one, and it's bigger because it's a male. It's obvious of that. But a good thing when you're out in the field and you're grouse hunting and you shoot a grouse and you fan out its tail feathers and you see this continuous black line goes all the way from end to end, that's a male. The females and the juvenile ones, I would imagine, probably have this type of a black line along their tail. It kind of runs to the midpoint right here and it stops. There's a break in it and it continues. See the difference? This is 100% male ruff grouse with that long continuous black stripe. And then the females of the species, and perhaps even the juvenile, the young birds that don't quite have all their plumage and coloring, are going to have maybe a tail like this. But I would generally think that your gender is determined when you're born and you hatch out, and so you're either going to have a solid stripe or a broken stripe. And in some of these grouse tail fins I have, there's an example of this. This is a male. This is a male ruff grouse. You can see it's all dark, continuing line all the way around. Now, this might have been a younger bird because if you look at the one in the picture, it's a more solid dark line. But see how that dark line continues across the midsection. So this is a male ruff grouse. Okay, just so you know. This other one I have, even though the fan isn't fanned completely out, you can see that broken midsection of feathers. There's I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 feathers right in the middle of their tail that if it's a female, it's not going to have that solid black line around there like that. So that's an amazing thing. So this is a female. This is a male. Okay, see the difference. Okay, now in Michigan, we have an interesting phenomenon that I'm going to bring up. And I found this out from some older hunting books that in another video maybe I'll bring one of those books out. But it's called the Upland Game Bird Hunter's Bible. It's an old book. It's probably from the 50s, 40s or 50s. I got it from either my dad or my wife's family, somebody in there. And what it has, it documents some interesting things about ruff grouse. One thing you'll notice in this book is that the ruff grouse has a very large range. Okay? Huge range. See if I can zoom in a little bit further. Okay. Let me try again. Let me see. Would 4 go into it better? Okay. So this is a map of the ruff grouse's range, where their habitat is and where they live. They live pretty much where they've got enough acreage of habitat to live in. Okay, so we're zeroing in on their home range. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. Michigan is right there. And Mr. R can probably find Pennsylvania and all that. Pretty much, if you see, there's a little, this is their traditional range. They're found in Oregon and Washington, where my friend Alan Cole lives. In most of Oregon, they're found in British Columbia, all of the plains, prairies, provinces of Canada. They're even found as far up into parts of Alaska. But what I'm particularly interested in is the major split in the genetic subspecies of ruff grouse. And where some of this has split off is, you see this little finger of range for ruff grouse. It comes into the Virginias, the Western Carolinas, and Tennessee and Kentucky right there. And then you see that little white area right at the tip of my finger. That's part of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, where there's a lot of habitat destruction. Okay, a lot of farming, a lot of open clear cut lumbering and production of farmland in this little area here, this little white area right at the tip of my finger. The ruff grouse range probably traditionally went through those states, but because of the development and the habitat loss in the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and Missouri, ruff grouse don't exist if you look on the map. I think that this white area of those 3 states coming across all the way through Colorado, all this white area that you see is probably lost habitat for the ruff grouse. They probably were there, filled that whole area in back in the 17 or 1800s, but habitat loss, clear cutting the land for farming, and that kind of ruined it for the ruff grouse. But what it did is it actually fragmented different subspecies of ruff grouse. And if you see on the map, right there at the tip of my finger, that's the upper and lower peninsula of Michigan, the Great Lakes. You got Wisconsin and Minnesota, northern Ontario, Canada, Quebec, all up in here, upstate New York. and there is a huge amount of solid ruff grouse range in that area. And up in this area, east of Michigan, the Great Lakes, is the St. Lawrence Seaway, which eventually dumps out somewhere near Maine or New Brunswick or Labrador, right up in here. Okay. So in Michigan, what we have is we actually have two subspecies of ruff grouse. This one here, hold on, let me zoom out again. Zoom out a touch. This ruff grouse here was shot in southern Michigan, probably within 45 minutes to an hour of my house in southeast Michigan. And this is what we consider a brown phase ruff grouse. And genetically, this subspecies of grouse that produces these brown tail feathers like this in this brownish color are what we call, let me zoom in again on our map, our range map. I gotta, hold on, be patient with me. I gotta try and zoom in a little closer to the map. Okay, I think that's pretty close. Okay, so here's where I live, southeast Michigan. You got this gap of white where, oh, hold on, I gotta hold this down. You got this gap south of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, all the way over here to Missouri. And that is what we call the Appalachian strain of ruff grouse. Probably the same grouse that you see in places like Pennsylvania, where Mr. R is from. And these birds kind of follow what we call the St. Lawrence Seaway. So they extended down into the Appalachian Mountains through Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas and Virginias, all the way up into Pennsylvania, New York, and all the way up the St. Lawrence Seaway. And that subspecies, what we call the red phase of ruff grouse in Michigan, are predominantly in our southern half of the state. Now, when you get into the northern lower peninsula of Michigan, or in the upper peninsula, where this fella got shot, let me get back to where I can zoom out, where this gray phased ruff grouse came from. And like in the picture here, this is a nice example of a gray phased ruff grouse. And they are the ones that are from northern Ontario, Canada. They're the ones that carry all the way over to Oregon, Washington. That's what we call the Great Lakes and Western subspecies of ruff grouse. Okay, so when you hunt in Michigan and you shoot ruff grouse, depending on where you're at in our state, you can shoot these gray ones like this that are the upper Great Lakes and Western subspecies of ruff grouse. Or if you hunt closer to home, like I do, and hunt down in southeast Michigan, you'll shoot a lot of these red phase grouse. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to find just all red phase grouse, where I hunt. I have shot gray ones down in southeast Michigan, but not so much. So these two subspecies kind of coexist and live, and I'm sure they interbreed in Michigan. But it's kind of an interesting thing, as far as game birds go, and a lot of people don't talk about it, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And I'm sure Mr. R will probably tell me, hey, Ralph, I shoot ruff grouse in Pennsylvania, and they're gray and red also. They're also gray phase and red phase ruff grouse. All right. And to answer that question, I'll have to say that Pennsylvania is kind of like Michigan. It's kind of in that northern edge where these two subspecies live. So it's very possible. I've never hunted ruff grouse in Pennsylvania where Mr. R is at, but I would have to bet that there's probably going to be some red phase, um, ruff grouse throughout Pennsylvania. And you're probably going to see some of those St. Lawrence and those gray phase subspecies of ruff grouse in Pennsylvania. So to answer the question, I think you got Pennsylvania is a state that has a mixing of both subspecies, just like Michigan. If you look, let me see if I can zoom in back to our range map. Hold on, let me play around. This is technological difficulty here at its best. Okay, so now we got the map up. I'm zoomed in. So you can imagine where Pennsylvania is for anybody that's from there. All right. And if you imagine where my finger is, let me put my finger there, that everything in that white area from Michigan over east is part of the Appalachian mountain chain. And some of those Appalachian strain grouse, the red phase ones, like this, commonly live in that area. They're commonly that reddish brown color like that. But you're gonna find that there's gonna be ruff grouse that are gonna be the gray phase, the St. Lawrence strain. Because like I said, they kind of both ranges overlap in a lot of different states. Not so sure about places where you can hunt ruff grouse in Ohio or Indiana in those areas, because there are some spots, even though it's not part of their traditional range, there's places that these ruff grouse like. And so like I said, you're going to get a mix of two different strains or three different strains, because I think some of the northern Michigan gray phase grouse are genetically part of the species that you find in the further western ranges of the ruff grouse area. So anyways, like I said, I kind of wanted to clarify that a little bit. And there are grouse in places like Tennessee and Missouri. I'm sure there's pockets of habitat that they would love and live in. Like I showed in the book the other day, is that they live in a variety of different environments. They love young aspen cuts like this. They love mature aspen stands because they feed on the buds of aspen and birch trees. So they like both places. They like both habitats. They like the thickness of a young growth aspen or birch forest like this. And and where what we call the whips. You're walking through there, you're going to get whipped in the face by all the branches in this kind of habitat. But they also like the more mature aspen and birch stands of trees that are intermixed with some fairly mature pine trees as well. They also like logging roads, and like Pennsylvania and Michigan, there are probably, I'm sure, a lot of old logging roads and little two tracks meandering through the woods. And the grouse love this thicket stuff along these logging roads. They love being along there. They also like river bottoms and creek stream bottoms. That's another place to look for them. If you look at them, they're actually a very adaptable, interesting bird because they actually live in. They'll seek out places. If you got a swampy area with a wooded island in the distance, that's a fair amount of acreage in size, like a high spot in a low area, you'll have grouse living there. They love that kind of place. They also like conifer stands, like this picture here. Um, and they're an interesting bird. They like to sleep in like humans do. So normally they fly up into a tree cover like pines or cedar trees, and they roost at night up in trees. Um, But they're not like turkeys where they fly down at first light in the morning. These birds, these ruff grouse, they will sometimes sleep up in the roosting trees until about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. So when I go out traditionally up north anywhere grouse hunting, um, I sleep in till like 5:30 or 6 maybe, and then I start getting my hunting stuff ready. And then what we usually do if we're in a hunting or fishing camp, like our Fins and Feathers weekend uh, camp that we used to do, we'll make breakfast. We'll make bacon and eggs and sausages, and we'll have a good hearty meal in the morning. And then we get up, and about 10:30, 11 o'clock, we start walking and going through the different habitats that you see in this book and the ones I've mentioned. And we will walk generally spread out in lines, 2, 3 of us. And if we have a dog or two with us, even better. But if we don't have dogs, we walk through that habitat in a stop and go fashion. Walk about 10, 20 yards, stop, kind of look around, and then keep walking. And the reason why is because grouse, one of their tricks that they'd like to do is that they would rather run away from you than fly. So the strategy is when you're walking is that every now and then you stop. About every 10, 20 yards you stop and you look around, and you're always ready because these birds get unhinged when they don't hear people or hear something moving. Whether it's a fox, a coyote, a human, a deer, a turkey, whatever. When they hear something approaching them, they stop and they freeze on the ground and they look around. And if they think they can start running away from you, they will. And I've seen them running 20, 30, 40 yards out away from me, trying to get away, running. Um, so you're watching for this kind of activity. And, if you got dogs, a dog can kind of keep up after them and will flush them or pin them to the ground and come around and surround them and keep them from running on the ground or flying, running so far off and then flying. So, um, they get nervous. So if you walked in a straight line for 2, 3, 400 yards through the woods, through these kind of mixed habitats, in a constant stride, you would flush birds, I'm sure, if there were some there, but you wouldn't flush as many. Okay? That stop and go pace, something I learned when I used to do a lot of pheasant hunting in Michigan, when we actually had pheasants, like wild pheasants. You could walk in fields and go after them. Um, Pheasants do the same thing. They get kind of nervous in that they're not used to a predator or some sort of a noise or a pursuer that stops. that makes any game bird nervous, and they want to jump up and fly or get away, and they reveal themselves. And often when I seen grouse running on the ground through the cover, along the edge of a logging road or whatever, I never got too upset about it, because if I seen them running on the ground, I said, you know what? Eventually, we're going to have some situation that's going to make them flush ahead of us if we're close enough to them. And usually they'll flush if you're walking along a logging trail or you're walking through a habitat and it changes. Let's say you walk to the edge of a ridge or like a ridge line. All right. And you're pushing them birds. When they get to the end of that cover and there's nothing left for them, they're going to fly across that ridge. They're going to fly across that ridge and seek that low, swampy cedar and conifer forest to hide in. And so you just got to be ready and be aware of your surroundings where you're hunting these things, and know that if the contour changes or you come to a creek or a river that they've got to fly across because they can't run anymore. They can run down a ravine or a steep hill. They can run down it, but when they get to that point where the ground is lower than their body, they're going to want to fly, and that's when they're going to be ready. So just a little tip to be ready with that gun and your finger near the safety and the trigger, so that when these things bust out and explode in that mass excitement, you're ready for them. So anyways, just a little pointer, and I wanted to do this little video primarily for my friend from Pennsylvania, Mr. R, from the Rondinelli Project website or YouTube site. Check him out. He's an awesome guy. I'm sure he'll become your new friend too. So until next time, be good and be safe. And I love all of you. And God bless.